So what would you tell a customer? So like I mentioned earlier, you're listing all these different policy types and then all these other different coverage types. As a consumer or just someone that's looking to purchase a home, get insurance, how would I go about even understanding this? Like what should my practice be if I'm talking to agents? What should I ask them to do to help me understand, or what's your practice if you're walking through something like this?
So I think from a consumer standpoint, right? I think it's important to ask questions of the agent that you're working with. And this is why I do think agents matter. I got a dog in the fight. I'm an agent, right? Yeah. But I think having an insurance agent, having a person help you matters, because when you just buy something online, you don't know what you're buying ultimately, right? You're guessing, you're hoping. So having somebody that you can talk to matters. And then I think you got to ask them questions. Yeah. So it's kind of like if you're going to work with a lawyer, or you're going to work with a realtor, or you're going to work with a mortgage broker, like you have to ask good questions to see like, hey, is this person a professional? Do they know what they're talking about? Do they understand their industry? Because I'm going to rely on them to give me recommendations. I recently had to change tax accountants. And so met with the new accountant that I was going to use. And I just spent like an hour just talking with them. I was like, hey, here's my philosophy. I tell him, like, this is my philosophy of how I want to manage my taxes and how I want to pay taxes. And this is how I look at it. And do you agree with that? And first off, right? And so in that same aspect, if I was talking to an insurance agent, my first conversation is like, this is my expectation. This is how I want to manage my risk. This is the risk I'm comfortable with, and this is the risk I am not comfortable with. Do you understand that, and do you agree with that, right? And if they do, then the next part, which my accountant did, so then the next part I was like, okay, now you tell me how you help me, right? Like you tell me what you're going to do, what your process is. And I'll ask him a few questions to see, like, does he seem to have a depth of knowledge in his industry? And so I would do the same thing with an insurance agent. I'd say, okay, tell me your process of how you're going to make this recommendation for me and why. And if he hasn't already, right? And then allow them to walk that through, and then ask them some follow-up questions to see, do they understand the difference between a DP1, a DP2, and a DP3, right? Like, can they explain to me the difference between named perils, open perils, extended replacement costs, ACV and RCV? Like, those are really basic things in the insurance world that an insurance agent should be able to explain to you. If they can't explain those things to you, I would say I would be concerned, because that means they probably haven't read through policies. And I tell new agents this all the time, like, you need to take time to read the policy that you're selling and read the policy that you're quoting against. Because if you haven't taken any time to read your policies, you don't really know what you're selling.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned this earlier, it's as if you're just buying online.
Right.
Like, why get an agent? Why go through an agent office? Just go buy some online then. If your agent hasn't taken the time to understand some of these different basic coverage types and abbreviations of how coverages work.
Right. They make us all look bad, ultimately. Like, I hate it when I see agents do that. No, I mean, it's easy pickings to take customers from them. Yeah. But but it bothers me, because I'm like, you're soiling not my brand, because we're different companies, but you're soiling the brand of an insurance agent.
Yeah. And we do see this a lot, like where people will get other quotes and say, well, we got the same. I told them my coverages and they gave me this price. It's like, okay, but have you seen the policy? Yeah. Have you seen the coverages that they quoted you in? Because it's one thing when someone tells me a coverage, I have 400,000. It's like, great. But our calculator came in at 300,000. So that's what I'm going to quote you for. And so, of course, I came under, $200 cheaper. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you, great, here's a quote for $200 less. And people do call us and say, I got a quote that did this and this. Our practice typically is, well, I'll review the quotes and I'll give you a comparison. Because unfortunately, the truth is, like you mentioned, is there are agents out there that, although you can tell them your coverages, one, maybe they don't even quote the same, or they quote you the same, but it's a completely different coverage type that is going to give you a cheaper quote.
Yeah.
You're not asking the right questions as the agent. So that would be the other side, is as an agent, how do you educate people? What would your...
So typically what I'll do when I'm meeting with somebody, as the agent, I'll ask them, what do you have for coverages right now? Because I think it is important to understand, what do you have for coverage? Because when we compare now, if I don't know what your coverages are, and because some people are like, well, just give me a quote. Well, I'm going to, but I want you to be able, when I sit down with you, I want to be able to show you, here's where the differences are. Otherwise, the only thing you're going to compare is the price. And price is important, but I want to first know what your coverages are. Then I need to understand what's important to you about your coverages, right? What deductibles are you comfortable with? What risk are you accepting, and what risk do you want to transfer to the insurance company? And then I will I always go through an asset analysis, which is basically just saying, what do you have at risk? Because most people don't even understand what they have at risk from a lawsuit standpoint. It's easy for me to figure out the value of your house. So then now I know what you have at risk for your home,
right,
from a fire or some type of claim that way. And then we need to know what you're at risk for from a lawsuit standpoint. And then I'm going to, based on what you told me about how comfortable you are with risk and how much risk you want to take, then I'm going to build a plan to try to match up the risk that you want to take on and get you the best value for that as I can.
Yeah.
And try to, and so then a lot of times what I'll do is, like, we'll say, okay, hey, we want to try to keep our premiums in this range. And I'm comfortable with $10,000 of risk, but nothing more.
Right.
Like, okay, well then we're going to use high deductibles. We're going to, anything under $10,000 where you would get a coverage, but it's only up to 10 grand. So like maybe personal injury protection or things like that, right? Those become optional now. And I say, okay, let's put those over here in our optional category. And those are like, they'd be great to add them in, but we understand that you're okay with that risk if we don't have them in there. Whereas we're more concerned with the $1 million claim. We're more concerned with the house burning down. We're not okay with the risk of $500,000 or $100,000 using ACV versus RCV, right? We're not okay with that risk, but we're okay with a high deductible because you told me you're okay with $10,000.
Right.
So now I want to build your insurance plan around what you're comfortable with. And it's not the same for everybody. Everybody has a different, because you're in a different place in life.
Right.
So everybody has different risks that they're comfortable with, and they have different tolerance for that risk.
Yeah. In the way you're putting it together, and I think the way that we try to, as an office, try to do this too, is there is trying to take consumers from, you have to pay insurance because that's the law, or the bank's requiring you, to, hey, the benefit of insurance is to protect your assets and to pay the things you're investing into, right? Is like, if I don't really care about my house and I just want to satisfy a bank, give me whatever.
Right. I'll take the ACV basic form.
Yeah. And as a consumer, then I am taking, as you're describing, I'm taking the risk, realizing that if I have a loss, I might be out of house, but hey, the bank will be happy, so I'm okay.
Right.
Versus if I'm a consumer who's kind of realizing there's a risk to this that I'm assuming, that I then want to make sure that I understand not just how the risk works, but what is my risk into it.
Right.
Am I out $100,000 or am I out just a deductible? Because the coverages are there to help me with extended replacement and, high deductibles or whatever. And so that is, as you're describing, like as an agent, you should have an agent who's walking you through, hey, this isn't just about satisfying a bank. And if that's what you want, if that's the discussion, like you were saying earlier with philosophies, your philosophy is, I just want to satisfy a bank.
Yep.
Great.
Right. And there's some people that are like that.
Yeah.
Like I've talked with people and they're like, they're very wealthy. And so they're worried about liability and they're worried about just making the bank happy. Because at the end of the day, he's like, hey, if this place burned down and I have to rebuild it, I actually have the assets that I could do that.
Right.
I'm like, okay, well then we'll strip it down. And if you're willing to risk $200,000 or $300,000 to save $200 or $300,
right? Yeah, typically the savings,
right? Like if that's okay with you, I'll build it that way,
right?
So I would say there's not necessarily, and that's why there's so many options,
right,
in the insurance industry, is because there's not necessarily one coverage that everybody needs. It is not a one size fits all snap back baseball cap, right? They are fitted. They should be fitted to your size.
Yeah. And I will give, I guess I'd encourage too. And we had a customer who last minute, they had to make a change to come to our agency because of her prior carrier and stuff. And so it was like last minute, can I just have a quote to satisfy the banks? So I remember because I worked on it. And this year she actually had the courage, because we typically try to offer reviews, and she had the courage to say, can you just talk me through what I have? Yeah. And she's honest. She's like, I've bought this from my parents. I've been paying it for 12 years and I don't even actually know what I'm paying for. And that's like takes courage, I think, as a consumer to go, hey, I actually want to know how this works. Yeah. And so I'd encourage you, if you really don't understand how this works, or you're not comfortable figuring out, wait, do I have replacement costs? Do I have, do I have broad, form, or special? Like what coverages do I have? I would encourage you go ask, because it's your risk that you're investing into. And so don't be embarrassed. And and whether a good agent or a bad agent, I think sometimes, life just kind of moves. And so you can have a really good agent that you guys just haven't been able to sit down yet.
That's true.
To talk to it. So I wouldn't even necessarily go all the way to blame. I think if you reach out and they keep ignoring you, then maybe you should find someone.
If the agent won't explain it to you, that's a problem.
Right.
But agents are not going to, it's not, the onus is not on the agent, or the responsibility is not on the agent to explain everything to you. I guess that is a good point. Like as a customer or as a consumer, if you don't understand something, it is it is your responsibility to raise your hand and say, hey, I have a question. I don't get this. Why, what do I even have? Right. Yeah. Like, I think that is a good question to ask. If you're not understanding it, if you're unsure, you're unclear, ask the question.
Right.
Yeah. You don't if you go to the doctor and they use big words, you shouldn't just nod and go along with it. Right. You should be like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
If your lawyer is using words you don't understand, you should say, wait a minute. Yeah. Define that for me, right?
Explain this for me, because I'm a little confused.
Right. These things matter. They make significant impacts in your life, financially, in long term, for your family. It's not necessarily that it's the wrong coverage. It just might be the wrong coverage for you.
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to find out, and we mentioned this earlier, you don't want to find out after a claim. Right.
Because it's too late.
Yeah.
It is too late at that point.
That's right. I think you said something about that, right? Or you've never said that to me. Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry. That's how that is. And it hurts as an agent, like at least for us, when we have to go, that was in the policy.
Yep.
Right.
I hate telling people that something's not covered.
Right.
When they want it to be covered. Right.
Yeah. And I was explaining earlier with my house, I realizing, I hope this is covered. Like, as a consumer, you start realizing, man, I hope I understand what I have.
Right. I hope I did this right.
Yeah. I hope I know. And I hope the agent understood what I told them, what I wanted. Yep. And the last thing you want in a moment of crisis, one, to be that unsure, but then to be told that, you're right, that's not covered.
Right.
That just brings frustration to everything.
Yeah. It's not, I will say this part, when I have to tell a customer it's not covered, I feel bad to tell somebody something's not covered. Although ultimately it's not my decision, it's the adjuster. Yeah. But I'll tell them, hey, we'll open a claim, because I understand this is a significant issue for you. My experience is that this isn't covered. It doesn't make me feel as bad, when I know that I've talked to the customer and we've discussed things and they said they didn't want to do it. And then I'm like, well,
yeah,
you chose to save the money on the insurance. Ultimately, my job as an insurance agent is to make recommendations and then follow your directions.
Yeah.
I don't write the policies for you. I will do what you ask me to do.
Right.
And so there is responsibility on the consumer. And I've had this discussion with, we have insurance called errors and omissions as an insurance agent, where if I make a mistake, right? Like I meant to do something, I didn't do it right. So I made a mistake and it results in a coverage gap or issue for my customer, that would go on my insurance and it would be covered then. And so I've discussed at length with our errors and omissions company as well, like what are the things that are responsible and what are not. And this goes back to your point when you were just talking a minute ago about if you don't understand something, ask the question. Because the errors and omissions industry is very clear that as an agent, if I make a mistake, that goes to errors and omissions. If I misrepresent something in error, on accident, not on purpose, I'm not like lying to you, I just made a mistake, that's covered. If you as a customer did not ask a question and didn't buy an optional coverage that you need, that is on the customer's responsibility because they didn't make the agent aware. Now, if you told me about something and I'm like, yeah, that's covered, but it actually wasn't, that's on my errors and omissions. But if you never told me something, right? You didn't tell me, oh, I have this big fish tank. So I never told you, oh, by the way, your fish tank is not automatically covered on your homeowner's insurance.
Yeah.
Or there's an exclusion on this policy for fish tanks if it bursts, right? I didn't tell you that because you didn't tell me you had a fish tank. So how am I supposed to know? It's unreasonable to think that an insurance agent is going to ask you every question that could possibly come up in a claims scenario. It's not their error if they didn't ask you about a fish tank.
Right.
If you told them about the fish tank and they misrepresented the coverage, that is their error. So you do have to make sure you have honest discussions with your insurance agent about what you're doing, because I think this is kind of a nuanced part of it. But when you get into the details of insurance, it matters. Oftentimes customers are trying to figure out how to get the best rates. And so they try to leave things out sometimes because they've realized like, oh, becomes an issue. This is some insurance companies don't like this. And so I don't want to tell them about it. It's like, well, that's fine, but you might have just wasted your money.
Right.
Because now you bought a policy that was cheap, but it's not going to help you because you didn't disclose these things.
Right. Yeah. That is like the transformation or the education of trying to get people to understand like details matter and coverages matter, because oftentimes as consumers, and we get stuck even as agents, sometimes we sell it this way or we just go, okay, it is what it is. That's where we're trying to get, the cheapest policy for the best service. And it's like, there's no such thing in the world like that. Like no business is set up that way.
Right.
I want to give you a Rolex at the price of a Walmart watch. Like it's not the
Rolex at the price of a Timex.
Yeah. There you go. Like that's not a thing. Right. And I think to a degree, educating people is just to kind of get us all in that same page of going, hey, you can't pay for the lowest premium and expect the best service. Like, so let's be aware, at least in that point. And going, details matter because
it's funny, right? Because people do I've seen lots of signs, like oftentimes at a mechanic shop or something, they'll like, you can get it quick. Yeah. You can get it good, or you can get it cheap.
Yeah.
Pick two. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Like you can't get all of it. You can't get quality, consistency, good service, comprehensive coverage, and the cheapest price in town.
Right.
Like it just, nobody's going to do that. You can't get a steak from Ruth Crisp at the price of a steak from Denny's.
Right.
Like it's just not going to happen.
Right.
But people think they do. They're like, well, Denny's. Like, it's like they walk into the Ruth Crisp and they're like, well, over at Denny's, I can get a T-bone steak for $24.99.
Yeah. You guys like price match?
Right. Can you price match that? And Ruth Chris was like, well, then you should go to Denny's.
You should get up. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not the same steak. Yeah. They're both T-bones, both 16 ounce. It's like, well, your experience is going to be a little different. Yeah. Let me just tell you that, right?
So last question then, like, what would you tell a client consumer? We just listed off a bunch of coverages. What would be your next step to say, okay, maybe I should go get educated? What would you?
Well, I think that would be, I think first off, as I think you need to, if you have your own policy, right? Like look at it, look at, say, what is my coverage form? Is it basic, broad, special? Is it an HO3? Is it a DP3? So that's where I would start. And then I would ask my company for a copy of my policy. And I know that it's laborious to try to read through it all. So I'm not even going to suggest that you do read through all of it. What I would focus on, if you have a special form policy, which means it's an open perils with exclusions, then I would focus on the exclusions. Like read through the exclusions and like, okay, is there anything I'm concerned about here? If it's a named perils policy, then you don't have to worry about exclusions. You just have to worry about what's actually covered because it's only covering your named perils.
If it's covered.
You might want to look at exclusions too, because there still might be exclusions associated with those named perils. But for the most part, you're really just like, okay, this is what I'm covered for. It's going to be very basic. And then I would go, what am I comfortable with? And then I would communicate what I'm comfortable with for risk to my insurance agent and say, this is what I'm comfortable with for risk. Can you make sure that everything else is covered? And then the agent can go in and look and say, okay, here's the changes we need to make to your policy to add coverage for this. I'm going to make a change over here because you're okay with this deductible limits, and start to tweak and customize that homeowner's policy or car insurance policy or business insurance policy for you. So that's what I would do as I'd first start with, like, I need to actually know what I have. And if I don't understand it when I'm looking at it, if it looks like Greek, then I'm going to say, I need to schedule an appointment with my agent and say, sit down with me. I need a half an hour to an hour, and I need you to explain this to me because I don't understand my coverage.
Right. Yeah. And you're definitely taking people and educating people from going, you're not just buying insurance to meet a need.
Right.
You're buying insurance to protect yourself.
Right.
Because you don't want to have question marks when you're trying to fix your house.
Right.
And go, well, I didn't know the coverage, or I didn't disclose it to my agent, and now I have to figure out how to repair, whatever it is. And so it does take, like you said, it's a little bit labor intensive in a sense of like having to read or just even set up a meeting. Some people are too busy, but it's the question mark of, but is it worth postponing for $100,000 loss?
Right.
And it could have been a simple, I do have a water tank. Okay, we should find,
I have a sump pump.
Yeah, have a sump pump. Like, it's an easy detail that is going to save you, tens of thousands of dollars at the end of the day. And so, it's a good encouragement to say you should probably take some time to invest into what you're investing into.